Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave.
Radhe Shankaraka was asked me to speak on the topic of good and bad association. The topic of association is very much stressed in Vaishnava culture. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was asked, how can we recognize a Vaishnava? The first point, the specific point that he emphasized, asat sangha tyag, a Vaishnavacha. That the very symptom of Vaishnava behavior is to give up bad association. There are many sections of Shastra which stress on this point. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, quoting from Katyayani Samhita, stated that it is better to embrace a tiger or to be kept within a cage within fire than to associate with a materialist. Similarly, Lord Kapila Dev, he stressed that one should give up association with materialistic women who are simply interested in dragging one is dragged to hell by such association. So there are very strong warnings. What is association? Generally when we think of association, we think of people who are good association means we should associate with good people, and bad association means we should give up association of bad people. That Prabhupada also used to quote from Chanakya Pandit. That Tyaja Durjana Samsaram Bhaja Sadhu Samadhamam. Give up Tyaja Durjana Samsaram. We should give up the association of bad people and Bhaja Sadhu Samadhamam. We should worship or take association with sadhus, genuinely saintly people. So that's the general understanding of good association and bad association. Is to associate with good people and bad people. Give up the association of bad. Bad means those who are not in Krishna consciousness. Now on the broader level, the most intrinsic level, good association means to associate with Krishna and thoughts of Krishna. And bad association means to give up all thoughts which are not Krishna conscious. For one who's very strong in Krishna consciousness, he can move even among very materialistic people and still be in good association. Because he doesn't take their association, but rather he also always associates with Krishna and Krishna's devotees on the spiritual platform. Whereas someone who's in totally corrupted consciousness, even if they're in the association of devotees, their consciousness remains corrupt because they don't accept the devotees, what the devotees have to say or do or think. They remain contaminated because they don't take the association of devotees, even though they may be in physical proximity to them, but they haven't developed the humility or the piety to have faith in them. The verse I was just quoting. Mahaprasade Govinde Nama Brahmane Vaishnave Swamapam Devatavanarajan Vishvaso Naikachan. Persons who are of meager pious activities, they don't have faith in Mahaprasad, in Govinda, in the holy name, or in the Vaishnavas. Of course, the association of strong devotees is so powerful that even by their association, people who are not interested in Krishna consciousness and who may be actually against Krishna consciousness, they can also become Krishna conscious. And it may be that even someone is quite advanced in Krishna consciousness, but if they get particularly bad association, they may succumb to that. And it's particularly stated, there's quite a shocking statement in Prabhupada's books that, it's actually quoted from the Bengali of Chaitanya Charitamrita, that even a highly advanced devotee can fall down if he hears the Mayavad philosophy. It's so poisonous, so dangerous. We've been talking a lot today about strong preaching. One thing is that people are so affected by Mayavad philosophy that they may appear to be like devotees, but actually they're still in their mind associating with so many misconceptions. And much of what goes on in the name of Bhakti in India, it's kind of something like Bhakti. It looks like Bhakti, but actually it's all contaminated by Mayavad ideas. So association ultimately means what is the level of our thoughts. That is, of course, much influenced by the people we associate with. Not only the people we associate with, everything we associate with. By listening to what is said, even not directly, indirectly, radio, TV, music, by reading what is written in newspapers or in Prabhupada's books or in Mayavadi's books, we associate with the energy of that person. And we see that association is very, very powerful to influence people's lives. The people who come in contact with Prabhupada's books or with the followers of Srila Prabhupada, then in many, many cases we see that their lives change so much that by later on with a little training and association, by their association, such persons, they can also influence the lives of others and change them. Association is so powerful. One devotee, one of my godbrothers, he said something very interesting. I remember him saying that when we listen to someone give a class, we can understand what they've been reading. Whether they've been reading Prabhupada's books or they've been reading the newspaper. We can understand from what they say. Or maybe you can, if there's a mixture of both, you can understand they've been reading both. Actually, Prabhupada didn't recommend reading the newspaper, but sometimes he would himself, and it's not bad per se. It can be done. If one just looks a little bit in the news, this, that, is there anything, then maybe in preaching you can use some points. Because if you immediately start with Bhagavad Gita, many people are not interested. But if you quote something that's maybe interesting to materialistic people, or you give an example how material life is miserable, that you can get from the newspaper. Newspaper means how material life is miserable. And you can also see from the newspaper how, despite all the misery, the foolish people are still trying to be happy. But it's dangerous. It's very dangerous associating with these things. Because especially even now in India, the newspaper means that almost every page is going to be a half-naked model, which is disturbing to the mind of those who are trying to cultivate purity. Of course, you may say that doesn't apply to the women, but it does to them also, because it gives an idea to them. Subtly, it may be, maybe not directly stated, that this is how we are supposed to be. It's a whole question of culture. We can see in India how the culture has changed so much over the last 10 years because people have been given the Western idea association. So the way people dress, the way they act, the way they think has changed, especially the more modernized people. So association, we should choose our association very carefully. Most people don't choose their association, just whatever comes up on the TV, they don't even think whether or not I should watch the TV. They just turn it on and watch it. And really it's a very bad policy to do so. That means that watching TV means that you are agreeing to have your thoughts shaped by people who do not have your welfare in mind. You are agreeing to be programmed by someone who wants to exploit you. That's what watching TV means. Someone who wants to influence the way you think, which is not the person who's writing the TV scripts and making the advertisements. They're not thinking of the benefit of the viewers. They're thinking how to extract money from them. So really we should try to get association with sadhus. Sadhu means someone who is concerned with our benefit and who knows how to benefit us. That's why we should let people know that these so-called sadhus, long-beard sadhu, mostly they're all long-beard, that's supposed to be the main symptom of the sadhu. There's a long beard and then somewhere in there there's a mouth out of which comes all nonsense. This is a sadhu. But these people are the worst cheaters because they're pretending to be saintly people. And even they make disciples, but they don't really have the so-called disciples' interest in her. They simply want to show, I have got so many disciples, for their own prestige. We should be very careful. We have to choose our association very carefully. Now, like I said, I've been speaking a lot today on request about speaking strongly. You may say, well, why? That's what I saw Srila Prabhupada do. And we may say, well, then how is it that so many people came to Prabhupada if he was so strong? Because people could appreciate that he was so strong, but he was totally dedicated for benefiting others. People appreciated his strong speaking was not from the platform of egoism, to show I'm better than you, but to help and uplift people. And that he wasn't simply speaking, that he dedicated his life. As Prabhupada said, quoting his own spiritual master, to make one devotee we have to spend millions of gallons of blood. So we should take that association with those who want to help us and who know how to do so. That means genuine devotees of Krishna. And if we don't associate with genuine devotees of Krishna, then we're going to associate with people who are going to drag us more and more into material consciousness. Association, that means to associate with people's ways of thinking. And like you're saying, that people who are not themselves very strong-minded, we all tend to be influenced by others. And we'll see that if we associate with a certain kind of person, then we'll start to adopt their mannerisms and their way of talking. And Chandramoli Maharaj, I was recently with him, someone mentioned that, well, you talk, even the style of your talking and even your voice and even the way you laugh sounds a lot like Radhanath Maharaj. He said, yes, several people said that to me. You said, you noticed that also? So he said that, well, they say that someone who you admire, you tend to, even unconsciously, take on their mannerisms. And I see that. You see that, just like you'll find in Gurukul Maharaj's Gurukul in Mayapur. Yeah, Vidyapala Maharaj. Then the young men with him, They come to him from different places in the world. They tend to dress like him, walk like him, talk like him, which is not a bad thing, because if you walk and talk like a saintly person, then that's very good. They may not directly be consciously doing it, but unconsciously, because they admire him, they're imitating him. As Prabhupada said, imitation of a good thing is not bad, but it shouldn't be only imitation. It should go deep, not simply to imitate the way they dress, but one should try to get onto the same level of consciousness. So we're all very much influenced by our association. And the written word, the spoken word, these are very powerful mediums of association. Prabhupada was very much aware of that. Therefore he wanted to write books. And he lectured extensively. Now, one thing you'll realize when you read Prabhupada's books, and this is the difference I find between reading Prabhupada's books and reading many other books, even Krishna conscious books. I find the difference is that, this is my impression, that I find the presence of Srila Prabhupada in every atom of his books, in every letter, in every drop of ink, and even in the space between the letter O. Prabhupada is there. And even if it's not explicitly said, it might be saying that so-and-so was the son of so-and-so, and you see in the Bhagavatam, or it may be making a description of different personalities. But in every atom of Prabhupada's books, even if not explicitly stated, implicitly the message is surrender to Krishna, surrender to Krishna, surrender to Krishna, give up sense gratification, surrender to Krishna. It's the pulse of Prabhupada's books. You can read any part of his book, that intense, insistent mood. You'll never find in Prabhupada's books, well, if you like you can surrender to Krishna, if you don't, it's okay. No such thing. Must surrender, must surrender, must surrender. Now, if you read certain magazines like India Today, you'll find it's not stated explicitly, but implicitly, in the same way in every atom. Enjoy this material world, there's no God, there's no religion, religion is stupid, material life is wonderful, isn't it? You've all read India Today, I'm sure. I can proudly say I haven't read it for several years, but I have read it. Actually, see, I was living in Bangladesh for some time, and at that time it was a very tense kind of situation when we were just setting up our movement there. And because it's a Muslim country, and of course we were just pretending to be tourists and all this kind of thing. So I rented a house, and the landlord lived in the opposite house. And he was a Muslim but a liberal kind of fellow. He didn't believe in religion actually. So we had to kind of humor him. He wasn't interested in religion, but he liked to have his idea was he liked to have some Westerners as tenants because one thing is prestigious for him. Another thing, he wanted to talk all kind of Western style gupshup. Just gossip this and that, because he'd been to the West and he felt himself more like a Westerner than anyone. So he used to give me this Time and Newsweek magazine every week, and I was supposed to read it and then discuss with him. That was part of the austerity of being there. So I used to read it, some things every week, and after some time I found something's going on here. I'm starting to think, well, actually America is very wonderful. How did that ever happen? Oh, it must be because I'm reading Time and Newsweek, because it's not stated there directly, but it's implicit that America is very wonderful and we're so kind to the whole world, we're exporting American culture, and the whole world should just be American, and then they'd be happy. Of course, not exactly American, we won't give you a passport, but you just do what we say. And if you don't do what we say, we have a horrible leader like Saddam Hussein, then we'll kindly bomb you to smithereens, and then we'll put in a leader who's a real nice guy because he's favorable to America, and then your life will be much better. So, I had some personal experience there. What is the effect of association? That I was reading Prabhupada's books, but by reading that, some effect started, and then I thought, what's going on? I caught that. Then I realized, just seeing, I'm being influenced by this nonsense. So, choosing our association. That means who we associate with and what we read, what we listen to. If we have association of strong devotees, that will be very helpful for our advancement. Be very, very helpful. Especially in the very beginning stages of our Krishna conscious life. The kind of association we get, it's just like a child in the formative years. It's called childhood. It's called childhood up till about the age of 20. That's called that's an English phrase, the formative years. This has been studied by psychologists. So once Prabhupada said psychologists are all humbug. But then in the Ishopanishad he gave some credence to them. He said they have some understanding into the workings of the human mind. So in childhood, and we could say during the teen up till about the age of 20, these especially are called the formative years. So how we're brought up, what is our education, the kind of ideas or worldview that we imbibe during that time, that tends to stick with us through life. Although it may change, and again this has been studied by psychologists, that is most, generally it remains fixed, but the one way that one's whole outlook of life is liable to be changed, that is usually by religious conversion. Otherwise, people's outlook on life doesn't usually change unless they have a religious conversion. So, when we first come to Krishna consciousness, in some ways, it's like being a child again. It may be somewhat different for you who are born in India, although the young generation nowadays, I see many of them from what is called the educated background. Actually, I find they don't really know hardly anything more about Krishna consciousness than young people in the West. That I wrote one book, Glimpses of Traditional Indian Life, and then there was one young devotee from Smata Brahmana family in Madras. He read the book and he said it was all new to him. He knew nothing about it. So, but it depends what kind of background. Actually, those who are from a less educated background, educated in modern Western education, they may have some idea of Krishna consciousness. More. That could be helpful or not helpful in both ways. Because sometimes if you learn it wrong in the beginning, it's difficult to get the wrong ideas out. But just like even now in Bengal, especially in Bangladesh, in the Hindu villages, You'll find that in Orissa especially, and probably in Maharashtra in the villages also, I'm not much acquainted with Maharashtra. You'll find many people there that from childhood, they kirtan, the kirtan culture, and they know how to respect elders and so many things they know. But in many ways, when we first come to Krishna consciousness, it's like a spiritual childhood. Our ideas at that time, hopefully our Prabhupada again, he said the disciples should be like a clean slate. We should be open to being educated. So that's why one reason we find many young people come. Once Prabhupada was asked, because at that time in our movement in the West, it was mostly all young people. When I joined, there was hardly anyone in the, I don't know who was there who was over 25. Hardly anyone in the temple, and there weren't any devotees outside the temple, hardly. There was one Gujarati doctor, and that was about it. He was also studying, student doctor. So Prabhupada asked, why there are so many young people here? And then Prabhupada gave a question back in reply. It said, why are there so many why are mostly young people in the university? And the person asking said, well, that's the age for study. And Prabhupada said, yes, that's why there's mostly young people here. Because this is the age where they can study, they can take it up. This is still the formative years. So young people who are getting the bad association of modern education, if they come in contact with devotee, you see what it is, often in people's minds there's a kind of discontent, but it's not clearly defined. They don't really know what's wrong. You'll find that often, especially young people, they're going through their education and they're going along with it all, and outside they're showing, yes, I'm doing my studies, and we're going to parties, and they're going along with it, but inside they're thinking, it's not even clearly formed in their minds, but inside there's some discontent or some frustration or feeling that something's not quite right. But they haven't maybe clearly formed that thought in their mind, and they certainly don't express it to others, because everyone else is going along with the same drama. We dress like this, and we talk like this, and we act like this, and it's cool, man, and you study, and you try to go to America, and this is our modern life. We go to some Western rock group comes, and you go and pay 2,000 rupees for a ticket, and all this kind of thing. Go to parties, and maybe most people are thinking inside there's something wrong, but no one wants to say so, because it looks that everyone else is helping everyone else to think that everything is fine and everything is wonderful. And inside everyone's thinking, something wrong here, but they don't want to say it. But when they come in contact with devotees, then the unexpressed feeling there's something wrong, it becomes focused, and then they can see there's something different. And devotees can introduce to them that actually there's a whole different approach to life. Kamasya nindriya priti. The human life is not meant for sense gratification. Whereas in modern society, it's bad association. Enjoy, 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 enjoy. It's actually very, very wicked association. This pushing you to enjoy. Because the ultimate result is that you're not at all happy. The great mistake of modern life is that people think that pleasure is happiness. There's a difference. Pleasure, sense pleasure, this sensation of the senses interacting with the sense objects. That can be called pleasure. That is called samsparshaja bhoga. The enjoyment that comes from the interaction of the senses with their sense objects. But that does not bring happiness. This pleasure of the senses interacting with the sense objects. In other words, putting something on the tongue which is tasty, or especially the main pleasure in this material world, that Pungso Striya Mituni Bhavameto, the attraction between male and female. So this gives pleasure, but it is a very ephemeral pleasure, very fleeting, just very quickly happens. And it's only pleasure, it means it's only skin deep, it's only very shallow, it doesn't give satisfaction to the heart. One young man I know, of course don't mind me being so explicit, but these things, it may be, maybe you think, well, we shouldn't discuss these things. Anyway, this is some realities of life, so don't mind, I'm speaking a little openly here. So one young man I know, he was so much anxious for sex. So eventually he got married, and then I met him again and said, so now you're satisfied? You're having your sex? No. There's nothing there. Now I have the opportunity. Of course he could have, done it before marriage, but he comes from a pious family. So at least he waited until he got married. He said, no. I knew he was going to say no. That's why I asked him. Because it's a big dream. I will be happy. Actually, when I was just a young kid at school, one teacher, is actually the one person I can think of before I came to Krishna consciousness, who he had some actually very intelligent thoughts on life, even though he's eating meat and smoking. But smoking, maybe I'm not sure. Probably eating meat, because pretty much everyone did at that time. So one of the things he said a few things which I remember even now. So he said that, you see, now you're very young and you're thinking that sex is so wonderful, but that actually when you get married and you get the opportunity, it's not such a, there's nothing really, it's nothing that important anyway. So at the time I thought, how can he be, what he's saying is true? But then again you see that it's advertised, this is advertised as this is the happiness. This is it. Everything is advertised. Cigarettes, toothpaste, everything is advertised. But then, if you consider this is what should make you happy, then just look on the street. Everyone's doing it, but they're not happy. Isn't it? Consider. People are not happy. What the main animal urge that we think will give us pleasure, well, it may give you pleasure, but it's not happiness. We don't see people are happy. We don't see people are ecstatic and their faces radiating bliss. Actually, it does happen, usually just after people get married. For a short time, they live in some kind of big hallucination. It doesn't last very long. Because there's no real pleasure. And it's the same with everything. We enjoy taking prasadam, but that is different to that of the gross materialist who goes to some restaurant or just whenever he feels. This is the modern society that just gratify your tongue all the time. Cigarettes, pan, gutka, coffee, tea, biscuits, all these things, all the time there should be something on the tongue. Chewing gum, all the time. You have a meal 4 times a day, whatever it is. Chinese usually take 5 times a day. And then in between there are so many things. All the time the tongue, 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 tongue. Something should be there. There's no enjoyment. No enjoyment. Devotees enjoy taking prasad, but their enjoyment is different. Because that is an exchange of love. We like to take so many nice preparations, that may be. But that is because it's an exchange of love. The devotees have offered this with love to Krishna, and then they're offering it with love to devotees. Please take. So you can get actually you go to any restaurant, there's no nice food. You can pay 600 rupees for a meal. You'll never get anything as nice as prasadam. Even if you go to the best restaurant, even if it's pure vegetarian and it's all the best chef, you won't get anything as nice as the simple prasad kotila. You won't enjoy it the same because it's simply cooked for money, that's all. There's no love there. The flavor that is enjoyed, but it's not enjoyable if we're simply thinking for my enjoyment, because it's offered to Krishna. Krishna has enjoyed like this, and devotees are so kindly giving it. That is the actual enjoyment of taking prasadam. So people, they don't know actually how to be happy. And the whole association is one of this constant pressure throughout life. From the child, you have to study, get a degree, get a job, so you can get money, and then you can enjoy. It's a big delusion, actually. It's not true. It's not true at all. There's no happiness in material life. No happiness. No. Zero. Zilch. Ziffer. Whatever you like to say. Nothing. No enjoyment. Enjoyment, yes, okay. Enjoyment means there is the enjoyment of one skin rubbing against another, something passing over the tongue, the enjoyment of listening to something coming in here. It's not enjoyment. Enjoyment, yes, we admit, alright, there is some ziffer plus 0.00000000001. That much enjoyment. What is that enjoyment? That is like the enjoyment of a man in the desert, Rajasthan desert, in June, who wants water, and someone comes with a little drop. You want water? There, one drop. Water. You ask for water, this is water. You got it. But it is not yenatma suprasidati. That pleasure, it simply makes us more frustrated. Pleasure in the material world makes us more frustrated because it gives us it's like getting a drop on the tongue. Something's there, so you feel something's there, but it doesn't satisfy. It's not the real thing. It's not enough. So we should associate with devotees who will give us the insight into what our real interest is. A real devotee, a real friend is one who gives us knowledge of Krishna. How we can actually be happy, who has our real self-interest at heart. Then by that association we can begin to see things in a different light. By materialistic association we think like materialists. If we associate with materialists, we think like materialists and we desire like materialists. Sangat sanjayate kamaha. This comes in Bhagavad Gita. Which means that according to our association, accordingly our desires develop. Such an important point. Sangat sanjayate kamaha. That which we associate with gives rise to our desires. So Krishna consciousness, as Prabhupada many times pointed out, doesn't mean to stop all desire, but to purify our desire. If at the present time we are in Maya and we are desiring that which is of no benefit for us, But there's very strong propaganda that if you don't be a materialistic person, there's something wrong with you. But our propaganda, Krishna conscious side, is that if you're not Krishna conscious, there's something wrong with you. So it's really a different way of thinking. That's why I'm not very much in favor, and definitely Prabhupada wasn't in favor of promoting our movement as something like a mundane welfare work with feeding the poor and so many things. Then we're just subscribing to materialistic people's idea of what is good on the mundane platform. It's good if our movement is known as different. We should be different. People should know this is something different. We're not part of the cheating society. Of course, parents and it's expected they have our best interest at heart. But they themselves don't know what our best interest is. They may be, from their point of view, very sincere to help us. But unless they can educate us in knowledge of Krishna, they can't actually help us. Rather, their so-called helping is not helping at all. So this is often a very vexed question for people who are coming to Krishna consciousness. What about my parents, and they think differently. But the basic principle is there that we should keep good association. Good association means that those persons who will help us to think in the manner that will actually be beneficial to us, that is, to understand that I am simply a servant of Krishna, and my only duty is to serve Krishna. That is a general principle. Very important principle. Which if we adopt in our lives, then we can remain very clearly on the path of Krishna consciousness. Even if by circumstance we are forced to take bad association. It may be. Actually, we can't avoid it. Even the brahmachari living in an ashram, as soon as you go on the street, there's the whole atmosphere is there of sense gratification. So, of course, if we're very Krishna conscious, we don't associate with it, but still the sights are there, the sounds are there, which may distract our consciousness. Prabhupada pointed out that even if we run away from everything and simply go and live in a cave, still our mind comes with us. So we may avoid bad association by hiding away, but we may bring one bad associate with us, namely our wicked mind. So, good association means to associate with Krishna and his devotees by the process of hearing and chanting about Krishna and serving Krishna. Within that process, the process of surrender, the two first points are anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. To accept everything which is favorable for advancement in devotional service and to reject everything unfavorable. So we should make habits of associating with those persons and things which are beneficial to our advancement and rejecting that which is not. That means we should make a habit of studying Shastra, and we should not have a habit of studying the newspaper. I was just saying, well, you could read the newspaper. Read means you look and see if there's something which might be useful for my Krishna. Personally, I don't. Hardly. I look at the newspaper. But you can do. Maybe. If there's something for your preaching. But no, we don't study the newspaper. There's a difference between looking at the newspaper and studying. You don't have to go into and read the in-depth analysis of the present political situation. If you want, you can read it. It's no harm to know who the chief minister of the state you're living in is. Things like that, some basic things. Who is it? Pawar or It's like, huh? Shinde, who's that? He's Chief Sena guy? See, I'm sorry. He's a Congress guy. What happened to Pawar? I'm really out of it. He's out of Pawar. Well, at least I know the name of the ex-chief minister. One of them. So, there's no harm to know. Few basic things, but not that we become absorbed in it. We have to choose our association very carefully. Become absorbed in Krishna consciousness. But because we have to interface with this world, then not exactly associate with this world, but as Rupa Goswami advises, that one should interact with, what's the exact word he used, Prabhupada translates, that one should not associate with this material world any more than is necessary. What is the exact words? Can anyone remember? One should not have material dealings any more, just the minimum. No. It's in the Nectar of Devotion. It's one of the 64 principles. That one should not engage in material dealings any more than is necessary. So some material dealings may be necessary. And especially if we're preaching, like this, just like we hear you're preaching along the lines of science and this and that. So you may study some things about science, not to become another mundane scientist. But to take some of their ideas and use that as an introduction to attract the attention of people who are not interested in Krishna consciousness, and show that Krishna consciousness is the supreme science. Because generally people who are studying science, they think, well, this is the way to see the world. And if we can show that we're proficient in that, and that we have something more, then that may be effective in preaching. Not that we subscribe to modern scientific worldviews. So these are some basic points. It's a subtle point. We have to be very careful. On the one hand, the general idea we should fully absorb in Krishna consciousness, but as preachers and persons living in this world, we have to have some interaction with it. So how far that should go? Generally, if we have to keep strong association with sincere devotees, and that will help us. Because always the tendency is for us to go too far into Maya. So it's very good to have strong association that can help us, correct us, and take pleasure in Krishna consciousness, so that we won't be attracted by this foolish association of material life. Exactly how we conduct our own individual life in Krishna consciousness, how much we should. Again, you see, many of you are young students, so dealing with parents, and again, when we say give up bad association, but then you may think, well, my parents, they're not Krishna conscious, bad association. But then on the other hand, we don't recommend that you just slam the door in your parents' face. That's also not very proper. I don't see that Prabhupada, he never had such a policy to do that. So, on the other hand, if they're forcing you should eat meat and all this, we're going to be devotees, we can't do that. So we have to see in each individual situation how to deal with them, take some advice. I've been speaking about speaking strongly, but there is a difference between speaking strongly, having strong principles, and being fanatical. There is a difference. Speaking strongly, but at the same time, not in an uncontrolled manner. It's just like a surgeon, he uses a knife. He uses a knife, and people they actually entrust him to cut their bodies open because they know he's controlled in what he's supposed to be knowing what he's doing. So we should be strong in our principles, but being strong doesn't mean to be like some Rambo kind of big person in the modes of passion and ignorance. No. One should be strong, but from the platform of the mode of goodness. So these are some various thoughts on good and bad association. It's a very important topic. Ultimately we have to associate with Krishna only. One who is steeped in the philosophy and understanding of Krishna consciousness, they can read the newspaper and not become influenced by that they can see through. In everything they see the three modes of material nature working. We can see it through the eyes of Bhagavad Gita. But the problem is if you associate too much with that, then you start to see Bhagavad Gita in terms of the newspaper. That's what happens. That you start to think, well, this is just some ancient mumbo jumbo. That's how materialistic people think. So be careful. Hare Krishna. Any questions about this? Comments? Protests? Protests are more fun.
Maharaj,
who's speaking? Can I see? Just put your hand up now.
Your thoughts on newspapers are very enlightening. Because being outside world, we sometimes get to read or rather read newspapers. But once I was analyzing my japa, it was like more than 90% of the thoughts were like previous 1 week what happened in the newspaper. The distractive thoughts were too strong in japa. So reading newspaper not only pollutes consciousness, it's too much a distraction in japa also.
Yeah. And we tend to become overly interested. Who's going to win the election? And we start to take sides depending on which newspaper we're reading. Who's going to win the World Cup? From the laughter I could understand that you're also doing so. I was in Chandigarh, that was just about Sunday, it was just how long ago was that? Just a week ago or something? I've been to so many places in between, I can't remember. So in the morning, I was giving a class and I taught, it was like this, IYF group. So I said, I hope India loses. I said, because I'm preaching here, it'll be better for preaching. If they win, they'll be in more Maya, but if they lose, they might start to think, well, actually life is miserable. If we tell people life is miserable, they'll believe it if India loses. But if they win, they won't believe it. And then the next morning we were leaving, just as we were driving, I saw some advertisement about cricket something. So then I said, oh, now I can understand India didn't win. I never thought about it. Because if they won, there'd be all patakas all night and crazy parties and all this. It's really Maya. This sports is actually, it's like the whole atmosphere of the material world concentrated. Everyone's competing and everyone loses except one. So everyone is disappointed except one team or they're happy and everyone else is disappointed. And then the next time the team who wins, they lose, so they also become disappointed. And you're simply putting your hopes that our team will win. You're putting your hopes for happiness in something which has again no substance. Because it really doesn't make the slightest bit of difference whether you so-called, what is this winning anyway? Winning again. It's only because someone made a rule that you agree to believe in, that if the ball goes here, then you get a run, And it's just something made up. Otherwise, it's just a ball is moving here and there, and people are running here and there. And you made it that it's some game, and you become attached that we will win. But it's all imaginary. There's no actual benefit whatsoever whether India so-called wins, and there's no actual loss if they so-called lose. It's all imaginary. It makes no actual difference to our lives except that we identify with it. It's like the epitome of Maya. That we identify with something that has got no intrinsic value, but we ascribe value to it, and therefore we become happy or disappointed according to that. So sports is like Maha Maya, concentrated Maya. Then, anything else?
Krishna Maharaj, you were talking about good association, that in duties as well also Maharaj, there are some duties who have very much material desire. So, can we associate them, Maharaj?
We should associate with devotees who are very serious to serve Krishna and surrender to Krishna. Even among devotees we may find some who they tend to talk loosely or gossip and this and that. So that's not good association. Better find that association which will benefit us.
And if they are coming and want to try to speak with us and associate with
yeah, you can say Hare Krishna, but it's better not to get thickly involved. That's all. You can try to turn the conversation to Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, just try and escape as soon as you can. If someone's talking all these things, maybe you don't want to be rude to them, you just say, well, excuse me, I have to go, or something like that. Or you can tell that, why don't we speak something about Krishna consciousness? Yeah, there's a question here. Oh, looks like the mic. Alright, next question will be here.
Maharaj, I want to know one thing. When we are in the outside the temple, we are constantly interfacing with people who are not Krishna conscious. So we have to associate with them. We don't have a choice. So how to not get involved, to at the same time associate with them?
Well, it's very useful if you're in office, factory, bank, or college, or whatever you're doing. It's very useful or very helpful to maintain our Krishna consciousness, to let other people know very clearly that we are trying to be devotees of Krishna. If we try to hide that, then they'll expect us to interact with them on their normal materialistic level. But if we tell them that actually I'm into Krishna consciousness, and just like for instance they may invite you to a party. So if you're not, if they don't know you're in Krishna consciousness, then you have to try and make some excuse not to go. If you are in Krishna consciousness, they probably won't invite you anyway. And if they do, you can tell them, no, I'm not interested in all this drinking and wasting time. You can say, I'm going to the temple. And they'll think you're crazy, let them think. That's one of the things that you have to be ready for if you want to take up Krishna consciousness. The people will think you're funny or different, because we are different. And from their perspective, we are funny. So that's something you have to be prepared for. Now, you can make your... What are you doing, if you don't mind me asking? Your software development. So you're in an office. Do you have your own cubicle or what? You have your own office, or you have your own desk?
Yeah, we have a cubicle.
Okay, so you put up pictures of Krishna, and you can have your wallpaper can be Krishna conscious on your screensaver, if you have time for screensavers. It's just work, right? One thing, the wallpaper on my laptop, I don't like to have pictures of Krishna in which the icons come up right over Krishna's face. So I just made it with all the icons on one side and Prabhupada's lotus feet in the center, so you don't get the icons coming up. And anyway, that's a detail. Yeah, let people know you're Krishna conscious. Maybe, do you have a lunch break?
Excuses that
3 minutes.
No, that's not an issue.
You don't eat while you're working and all this kind of stuff.
No,
that's when you're on a project.
But the issue is that by the virtue of being so much of exertion during work, so people expect that the company management expects that once a week there is a pizza party, once a week there is a party which goes for Chinese food and other things. So if it stops going everywhere, then they feel that this person wants to quit, and that's why he is avoiding all this kind of.
No, you can just tell them that, look, I have some certain principles in my life, and one of them is that I don't go to pizza parties. You can tell them, look, I'm that's different. That's all. I have a different way of relaxing, and that's chanting Hare Krishna and dancing. You can tell them it may not be the best thing for your career development. Maybe not. That mostly depends on your performance, right?
Yes, it does depend.
And there's also office politics and this and that. Anyway, you can also give people prasadam. And in the beginning they may laugh and this and that, but after some time, the people who are laughing, they'll come and say, what's all this about actually? And then they'll ask you, how did you get into this? And you say, well, actually I met one of my friends from New York, started sending me emails. You can say something like that. Tactics. The thing is that you don't have to go along with their way of thinking. Your job is to produce. That's what you're paid for. So you do that, and then they can't complain. Let people know you're into Krishna consciousness. That's my advice. Others may advise you differently. You have to see what's best for you.
Actually, I'm a very frank kind of a person.
You're very what kind of person?
I'm very frank. If I feel that the association is bad, I just immediately break it up. Like whoever it is, friends or anyone. But
that's one way.
When it comes to my father-in-law and mother-in-law, it's very difficult because the father-in-law is an atheist. He does not like be into Krishna consciousness, doing devotional service. And the mother-in-law, she just pretends, oh, you're doing very great things, but behind her back, like she just say that, oh, what are you doing is really wrong, and it's so difficult to, I kind of like the same principle, what I've like my friends, that I'll just break the relationship. It's so difficult to tackle with such kind of people, family members. So, how do I, can you please help me out?
Generally, it's recommended to try to maintain the peace in the family.
Right.
There's a reason for that. Very important reasons. We're talking about association, and association on the broad level means culture. Family atmosphere. Who are the most important people in the family? The children. So they should be brought up, you may not, I don't know whether you have children or not, but family means...
No, I'm just married.
I see. So there will be, by the grace of God, in the course of time, the hoped for and expected result. It's not anything to laugh about, it's life. So it's very important that children are brought up in a peaceful family atmosphere. So it's very much part of Indian culture, and especially the role of women in Indian culture is to be, which is in the modern idea, they get this women's liberation, this and that. They're saying you should live your own life. But traditionally, women especially, they live a life of sacrifice, and sacrificing their own self-interest, particularly for their children. That even they may not feel very happy, but they don't want to show that in front of their children. And children may get to know in course of time. But just like if the mother and father are to fight, which is not recommended, but it may happen. So if they do, they should never do that in front of the children. So it is important to maintain a peaceful atmosphere in the home. And one may...
but Maharaj, not at the cost of Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, just wait a second. One may have to make some adjustments to do so. Prabhupada wrote about family members, again I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember the exact words, but that you may pacify them by verbally agreeing to what they say, although not necessarily doing what they want you to do. So anyway, it's better you get this, you come to some kind of truce before you have children. It's very, very important to me. Actually, it's very, very difficult if you're not happy at home. But you can be Krishna conscious even in an atmosphere which isn't, even if the in-laws are not very Krishna conscious. A lot depends on your own, on yourself, on your attitudes and everything. I mean, I traveling around, I meet so many different people. There's one lady I know in South India who, her husband and her parents-in-law, they don't like at all her being Krishna conscious. But she tolerates everything. I mean, they treat her quite cruelly. But she tolerates everything. She does her duty of cooking, everything, cleaning, but she goes out, she does all her duties, and then she sits and chants 16 rounds and reads Prabhupada's books and tolerates everything. I think she's a very saintly person because she's being an ideal mother, wife, and daughter-in-law. She's doing all her duties. She doesn't complain, even though they don't treat her very nicely. She never complains. They don't like her chanting Hare Krishna. She goes on with that. But they can't ultimately see she does all her other duties so well that they can't actually fault her. So that, I think, is a very ideal approach. Fighting isn't always the best way.
Actually, Maharaj, they expect that I shouldn't go to a temple. I should sit with them and just gossip with them, I just can't tolerate that.
Yeah.
I just keep silent then,
Yeah.
So,
Your husband?
He's here, sitting here.
Okay. So take his advice. Take his advice.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Maharaj, as you told you, the test is that actually in real life, by being material
Real life?
Yeah, in material life,
Yeah.
we are
That's
not
real?
really happy.
You think that's real?
Yes. Actually, we are not real.
This is real life.
Yes, right. We are.
For you, that's real.
That is not real life actually. Right?
It seems real.
So we are actually not really happy with that.
That's why it's not real. It is real if
So,
you may take solace in the fact that it's not real.
That's not real.
Yeah, it's not real.
Okay.
That's a wonderful realization, isn't it?
So,
If that was real, if that was all there is to life, then how miserable it would be. That's what you get. You get these existentialists, one class of so-called philosophers in the Western countries. They see that life is miserable, that they have no higher hope. Therefore, their philosophy just comes down to whether I should kill myself now or just wait till later. Because they consider that this is reality and it's so miserable that it's meaningless. So it's very good to know that this is not reality. Reality is Krishna consciousness. We should always remember that.
Actually, if reality is in getting Krishna consciousness, then is there not any way of getting actually happiness in life?
No, there's no happiness except Krishna consciousness.
There's no any other.
No.
People of any other religion, any other community, it is not letting it that it is true. Not for him.
They may not believe it's true, but it's true. If 10 million people vote that 1 + 1 = 3, it doesn't make it 3. By popular vote, reality doesn't change. People of other religion, other community, there is no other religion. Religion means to surrender to Krishna. Other things which are going on, so-called other religion, that's some kind of socio-religious excuse for pretending to be devoted to God. Otherwise, religion means surrender to Krishna, that's all. You say other community, other religion, everyone's a materialist. Who's surrendering to Krishna, that is religion. You see, people are fighting Hindu, Muslim, Sikh. What are they fighting? Well, they're all basically the same. Everyone wants sense gratification.
Respected Holiness, with your permission, I just want to ask a frank and blunt question. Will you permit me, sir?
I don't have much choice. The mic's in your hand.
Sir, regarding that sense, that sex gratification, if you are telling that physically we are not supposed, because I am myself a bachelor, I myself move with different type of people, men and women have they are coming. But mentally, physically they may not be coming, but mentally each is so what do you say about it?
Mentally what? I couldn't understand.
Suppose physically they may not be coming in contact with one with an outer person, but mentally they are enjoying in a different.
You mean subtle sex enjoyment?
No, physically they may be husband and wife at the bed, but mentally they are with someone else.
That is sinful.
Thank you, sir.
I can't. What's actually the question?
Sir,
they're developing attachment to someone else.
Yeah. Physically they may be.
Yeah. That's why I'm actually not at all in favor of this whole modern idea of.
It's not modern, sir. It has been coming in generation. People are deserving each other.
No, the modern idea that women move freely in society. Previously there was more restriction. So there was a reason for that. Because that's stated in Shastra that it's just like the proximity of, if you have ghee, solid ghee in a pot, and you put it close to fire, what will happen? It will melt. So the same thing, if man comes in contact with women, then that very strong attraction will start to develop. So previously, there was protection of women, which means that there are various reasons for that. One of them is to protect people from falling down, because what happens, first of all, one becomes subtly attached and then grossly attached, and it causes a lot of problems. So many problems in society that people that are already married, then they go off with someone else's wife, and it causes so much distress and so much disturbance in society. And there's no question of Krishna consciousness in such a situation.
So, I'm not talking about physically, but mentally they deceive each other. That's what I'm saying.
But what I'm saying is that mentally leads to physically. So it should be stopped before it comes to that. It's a very good, you see, most people in this world, they're going, everyone's not going to be a brahmachari, most people are not. So, recognizing this, there is in every religious system of the world, there is the institution of marriage, which is not simply something you go and sign. Nowadays you can go and simply sign. But there's a religious ceremony. In other words, it is supposed to, man and woman unite, but not simply on the sex principle, because that is animal life. But they should come together in the eyes of God to live together and raise children in God consciousness and with chastity within marriage. That when you're married, you don't go here and there outside of marriage. It's very, very destructive to society and a cause of great distress to the people themselves who do it. If they think, I'm going to have some fun outside marriage, actually they don't have fun. They cause so much distress to their wife or husband, and mentally they feel so much guilt themselves. So all these things are being advertised in modern life, but it's actually it's not, even on the material platform, you don't at all get any happiness. So in any culture in the world, and especially in Vedic culture, sex is allowed, but with restriction. Unrestricted sex is the cause of hellishness in society. Simply hellish situation. What to speak of so many diseases. So in modern life, people think this is all old-fashioned, this restraint on sex, but actually it is required. Otherwise, the whole society simply becomes just exactly like hell.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, nowadays we have to appear for competitive exams, so we have to study newspapers literally.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? They ask in the question, even in the children's exams, they have questions like I don't know what's going on TV, and so you have to watch the TV, otherwise you fail the exam. They're really very strongly forcing you to be a demon. Very, very strong.
But we don't have any option if we...
Yeah, it's hellish, isn't it? It's demoniac. They've really got their act together. How to restrain people from being pure. They're very determined that everyone should be totally corrupted and totally demoniac mentality. Very difficult.
So what can
be done? Make the best you can. Study Prabhupada's books, chant Hare Krishna. Maybe you could fail that part of the exam and come study more on the other part and come through. Or maybe you could just ask the fellow colleague, what's in the news these days, or whatever. Try and get around it. Very demoniac system. That's why Prabhupada, he actually wanted to change the whole world. He didn't want to just open a few temples here and there. He wanted to change the whole society, the whole educational system, everything. The whole economic system, everything. The whole culture, everything Prabhupada wanted to change. Because he knows the whole modern society is simply dragging us to hell. So one thing you could do to escape all this is to come and join the frontline troops who are engaged in changing society.
Maharaj, we are a Krishna consciousness people, then we are very determined to preach. But in outside circumstances, many times we fail. And we don't get what according to Krishna consciousness should be happened, then mind think that it is the age of Kali, in future everything is going to degrade, and what we can done.
What can be done? In preaching we should understand that not everyone is going to accept what we say. That's the first thing. Prabhupada preached to, how many people did Prabhupada preach to? And which percentage of those people took up what he said? Only a very small percentage of the people who heard Prabhupada took up what he said. In general, the best preaching, if we can distribute Prabhupada's books, that's very good preaching. That is something solid. If someone has Prabhupada's book, then that's something solidly beneficial for them, which they may read or may not read. They may read it 20 years later. Someone else may read it. When you speak, people may take it or leave it. But if you give a book, then you know that something very solid and positive in preaching has been done. So it's not that we shouldn't speak, but if you find that you're not getting so much success in doing that, then you could maybe concentrate more on distributing Prabhupada's books. It's a suggestion.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, evening class, you were talking about that we should be very open when we teach Krishna consciousness. They should know that we are different. We are not like any other organization. But generally when we talk so openly, people say that you are blaming those organizations and they in turn blames you. So what is the difference?
Then you use your intelligence and see. God has given you intelligence. So you try to understand. It's not simply that one person is blaming the other and they're blaming. You try to understand what is the truth, what is the fact, what is the reality. Is what we are saying correct or not? Give the challenge back to them.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It is said that if we connect our Krishna conscious philosophy to practical life, then we get lots of realization. And in youth, after getting some degrees to appear for interviews and discussions, we need lots of current knowledge. So is it okay if you read Krishna conscious Prabhupada book and simultaneously read newspaper and get some practical realization?
Well, that's what I was saying. You may have to get your so-called good job. Realization you'll get from reading the newspaper. You get the same realization every day that this world is miserable and the people running around in it are miserable. All rascals. So you don't need to read the details to get that. Don't think that there's anything good in the newspaper. Then that's a misrealization.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. In addition to what Swami asked you the question, that we have to study certain current book knowledges, means like newspapers or GK books.
Which books?
GK books.
What's GK?
For competitive exams.
What was that last comment?
Competitive exams.
Competitive.
Yeah, exactly. So now what the point is basically that
well, you could maybe start your own business. You don't have to be employed by someone else. It's a possibility. You can also join Radhe Sham.
there are many factors basically linked with this.
The thing is that that's what Prabhupada said. Modern education just makes you into a shooter. You have to run around trying to get someone to employ you, and you have to wag your tail. Prabhupada said, just like a dog, you have to wag your tail according to the way the master wants you to wag it. It's a very miserable situation. That's what I'm saying. Maybe you could start your own business or something. Do something.
Well, one of the factors is that what happens that on one side you are expected to perform well outside, and on the other side, the
this job means you have to give all your time, your life, your energy, your mind to the employer, just to get some miserable few rupees. That's all. This isn't it miserable. They expect you to, so-called good job means you just practically have to become their slave. They dictate the way you dress, and they expect you to act and go to their pizza parties and everything. They just want to control your whole life. And just work. And then they give you some money and they think you've got a good job.
Maharaj, the point is that on one side, the outside people, they expect you to perform well, that is 100% productivity. And on this side of the, like when we come back to our temple and we are again being with a part of this devotees, the devotees expect you to perform well. Like they expect you to perform 100%, so that you cannot like lose touch either way. So in that case, you are put in a sandwich. That's what happens in the end.
So you choose which side of the sandwich you want to be on.
So Maharaj, basically,
here's a suggestion. Devamrit Prabhu is setting up some agricultural community. Join that. No, I'm saying this very seriously. Why? Prabhupada wanted these communities so that people could live and have a means of livelihood without having to sacrifice their lives to the demoniac society, which kills your spiritual inclinations and doesn't give you any time even to practice Krishna consciousness. Then you can live in good association and produce what you need to live, which is very simple actually. He's not required to work 16 hours a day. It's a serious suggestion.
Yes, Maharaj, we welcome your suggestion, but the point is that we also facilitate every individual's propensity, like what he would like to do, and accordingly like he progresses spiritual life. So that it may not be always that that he takes a person who is okay with technical background has to shift.
Well, that's not really a propensity to work 16, 18 hours a day. That's slave life. Agricultural community doesn't mean that everyone's doing agriculture. Everyone will have a little garden in which they grow a little food for themselves. Traditionally, everyone did that. But it doesn't mean that everyone's main occupation is producing grains or farming. There are also, in an agricultural-based community, there are also teachers, doctors, priests, artisans. There are so many things to do. Not everyone's producing grains. You think, you investigate and see if it's a viable alternative. You have to think, you have to see what is the best thing you can do to become Krishna conscious. Now you've got the opportunity. What is the best way you can live your life so you can be Krishna conscious? Your so-called career is not really of any value whatsoever. You should understand that. Krishna conscious is. If you can do the two side by side, okay. But if you're more attached to having a so-called career than to becoming Krishna conscious, then you're not going to get very far in Krishna consciousness. You have to be a little bold, you know. If you're going to actually be Krishna conscious, then you may have to just turn your back on the modern society and what various materialistic people expect of you.
And with this, because all of us are students in right here, so the main point is that if at all they perform well, let us say 90, 95%, 99%, so that automatically speaks of their Krishna consciousness also. So wouldn't you say in the end that if they excel on that part, it can
maybe.
Why maybe like?
Maybe, because you get 95%, what's that got to do with Krishna consciousness? That means that Krishna consciousness doesn't cause you to fail in the exam. Is that the idea?
Yeah, in case because the student he fails, that means it speaks that he is not even Krishna conscious also. That's what the logic speaks.
Really? Because you might fail anyway, even if you weren't in Krishna consciousness. It's not necessarily that the Krishna consciousness makes you fail or succeed. Is it? If you're going to fail, then whether you're Krishna conscious or not, you're going to fail. Isn't it? In general, if you're a student and you have good marks, and you're in Krishna consciousness, then people will think, okay, there's no harm in me being Krishna conscious. From that point of view, it's good. And if you do fail, then people may blame it on Krishna consciousness. But ultimately, the two things, they're quite different. From a materialistic point of view, people may think like that. But ultimately, failing or not failing has got nothing to do with Krishna consciousness. Alright, I'm going to finish there because it's getting a little late, and tomorrow's another day. We all have to rise early.